Resourceful Designer, episode 151, 12 Effective Ways to Ruin Your Design Business.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host, he likes Kirk over Picard, Mark Dickhout.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. In this week's episode, I'm going to discuss things you should avoid doing if you want your business to succeed. Then I'm going to give a little plug once again for my very own resource that I'll share as the resource of the week before ending the episode with a question from Kevin about closing deals with clients. Now, I have to tell you, I had something very interesting happen to me this week. A longtime client called me up and they were all upset because they did a Google image search for their business name. And they were wondering why all these other images were showing up in the search results that had nothing to do with them. And they actually asked me if I can please delete those. And honestly, when the client asked this, I wasn't sure if she was joking or trying to pull a prank or what, but no, she was serious. She thought that if she did a Google image search for her company, it should just be her company's images that show up and not all this other stuff. And I had to explain to her that just like when you do a regular Google search, not an image search, a regular search, there's other results that show up, not just her company, even though you search for her company name. It's the same thing, and I have no control over Google. So anyways, I got a good laugh out of that. It was one of those things that in all my years, I have never had anybody ask me that. Can you please remove the images from the Google image search? Just shake my head at that one. But besides that, I've been quite busy. I finished off a couple of podcast artworks and actually got a few more. Had some meetings with some clients to discuss their podcast artwork. Designed a business card for a new client. I didn't do the logo. They supplied a logo that they had, but I got to design their business card. So that was a little bit fun. It wasn't a very long project, but it was fun to do. And one thing that was really fun was having a great video chat with the Resourceful Designer community. And in it, we talked about client acquisition strategies, specifically focusing on how using local SEO and landing pages can really be to your advantage. Now, that video is available for replay to anybody who is a member of the Resourceful Designer community. And if you're curious, the community will be opening up again soon to everybody who did not join before the end of 2018. So that's what I've been up to. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, the resource of the week I want to share this week is my very own 4-week marketing boost. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you know all about this. But every week, there's new people tuning into the podcast who have not heard of my 4-week marketing boost. Now, if you're curious, what this is a short ebook that I put together. And as stated, 4-week marketing boost. It has 20 short tasks that you can complete in order to create a better image for your business. These are things that take no more than 30 minutes per day to do, and I call it the 4-week marketing boost because the 20 of them, you're meant to do them over the course of 4 weeks, one per day. When you've done, you should have a better first impression to present to potential clients. So it's just kind of a tidy up whatever you have on the go right now, so that when people discover you, there's a better chance that they're going to want to interact and want to hire and work with you. So you can check it out absolutely free to download by visiting marketingboost.net, or if you are in the USA, you can text the word marketing boost, one word, to 44222, and that'll get you the manual as well. So I've had many comments from designers thanking me for it, saying they've implemented it and they've seen some growth, or they've just liked some of the stuff, some of the comments, some of the ideas in it, things they hadn't thought of before. So I've received a lot of praise over the last couple of years for this guide. And if you haven't checked it out, I highly suggest that you do. And take the 20 to 30 minutes per day for the next 4 weeks as you work through it and improve your marketing strategy. And now, 12 effective ways to ruin your design business. Sounds ominous, doesn't it? Well, I want you to think of your design business like you were climbing a mountain. In order to climb a mountain, a person needs willpower, they need perseverance, they need skill, obviously. They need to have a knowledge of what they're doing, They require stamina. They require patience. They require concentration. All of those traits come together to allow the mountain climber to slowly make their way up the mountain. Well, those same traits are what is required to run a design business. Sure, they're used in a different manner than climbing a mountain, but they're the same traits nonetheless. And similar to climbing a mountain, one slip can mean disaster. Now, luckily, slipping up on your design business won't result in death like falling off a mountain will. But if you do slip up, it could ruin your reputation, which in turn could ruin your design business. And that's why I wanted to share these with you and why it's good to stay on your guard and avoid these 12 ways that could ruin your design business. So number 1, taking too long to reply or failing to communicate. I admit that I used to be guilty of this one. I would get an email in, somebody asking for a quote on something, and I'd look and I'd go, oh, wow, that looks like a really good job, but I'm in the middle of something right now. I'll get back to them later, and then I'd forget about it. And days would go by, and then all of a sudden I'd find the email and go, oh man, I forgot to reply to this email. And then I'd send something off, and it was too late. They'd already found another designer because they hadn't heard back from me. And after that happened a few times, I set some systems in place for that sort of thing. Now, I don't use Gmail, but if you are using Gmail, there's a great program or add-on, I don't know what you call it for Gmail, called Boomerang, that allows you to take an email that you get in and set up a time so that that email shows up in your inbox again. So if it's something, like say you get it late on a Friday and you don't work weekends, you can tell Boomerang to make that email show up again Monday morning so you won't forget about it. Now, I said I don't use Gmail myself, so I use either Siri or I've got an Amazon Echo on my desk, so I will use this woman in the box. I won't say her name because she'll activate right now, but I will ask either her or Siri to set a reminder. And sometimes it'll be remind me in 30 minutes, remind me in an hour, remind me tomorrow, remind me Monday. And I got tons and tons of these reminders just telling me to contact a client, reply to an email, send out a proposal or a quote or whatever. Because if you take too long, it can hurt your reputation or failing to communicate. And when I say failing to communicate, that might not necessarily be on a first contact. It could be a case where a client is expecting something and they're not hearing from you. When I was working back at the print shop, there was this designer in town. He was younger than I am, but he was running his own business, and I was so envious of him. In fact, he's one of the reasons, one of the motivations that led to me leaving and starting my own business, is I saw the way he was going and the work he was doing. I was always so amazed when he'd bring in these really wonderfully designed pieces to be printed. But then what started happening was clients of his were booking press time and the jobs weren't showing up. And they would ask us, have you heard from this guy? Has he communicated with you? Because we've been trying to reach him and we haven't. So there was a failure of communication in that part. And that led to him eventually shutting down his business because he ended up getting a reputation that he wouldn't get back to you. And he was unreliable. He was amazing as a designer. But his reputation that he was unreliable and you couldn't count on him led to him having to close his business. And that's too bad because, as I said, he was a really great guy. In fact, he is still working as a designer, but now he's an in-house designer for a company in town. He closed up his business and now he's working that way. And he's very happy. I've talked to him since then and he's very happy. But that reputation of failing to communicate with his clients ruined his business. Now, reason number 2 is missing deadlines. And a lot of it comes down to time management. Either you forgot to mark down a deadline, you told a client that you'd have something ready for them on Friday and you didn't note it down anywhere and you forgot that you told them that, or you told the client an unrealistic deadline. I always pad my deadlines, meaning if I think I can get a job to a client by Friday, I will tell them that I'll get it to them by the following Wednesday or even the following Friday. And if they're okay with that, think about it. The client will be so happy if you deliver a week early. A lot more so than telling him you can deliver it on Friday and not being able to and showing up late. So missing deadlines can really, really ruin your reputation, which in turn could ruin your business. And it all comes down to time management. So be very, very careful whenever you set a deadline, whenever you tell a client you're going to have something done by a certain time or day or whatever, make sure you take note of that so you don't forget it, and make sure you deliver on time. Now, the third very effective way to ruin your business is showing a lack of confidence. Anytime you doubt your ideas, you doubt your abilities, you doubt the designs you've done, and you show a lack of confidence, will hurt you as a designer, will your reputation, and hurt your business. Clients come to you because you are the expert. You offer a skill set that they don't have, so they expect you to know. If you present your design saying, here's what I did for you, but I'm not quite sure, I don't really like it, or I don't know if this will really work. Well, the client is not going to have confidence in you, and they're not going to want to keep working with you if you're showing a lack of confidence. One thing to avoid is whenever you are presenting your designs to a client, you should never really ask the client, what do they think? You can ask them what they prefer. You can ask them what they don't like. You can ask them what they would like changed, but never ask a client what they think, because subliminally, it's almost like you're questioning yourself as well. When you ask a client, here's my design, what do you think of this? It's almost like saying I'm not sure myself and I'd like your opinion. And that's showing a lack of confidence. And if you have a lack of confidence, people are not going to want to work with you. So even if you're not sure of your designs, which if you're not sure of your design, you shouldn't be presenting it to your client. But let's say you are. Even if you're not sure of your design, you should go in presenting to the client like this is the design. Don't show a lack of confidence. Now, another great effective way to ruin your business is biting off more than you can chew. And that could mean taking on too much work, which I know that you may be thinking, wow, I would love to be in a situation where I have too much work, but it could happen. And there could be a time where you have multiple deadlines. I talked about missing deadlines. Well, one of the reasons you may be missing deadlines is because you have too many deadlines and you can't work with them. There's only so many hours in a day. And if you can't get to that work and get it done because you have too much, you've bit off more than you can chew, it can really hurt you. I remember back when I was hand coding websites before I got into WordPress and that, I had a strict policy that I never worked on more than 2 websites at a time. If a client came to me with a website project, I would let them know that I'm currently working on 2 websites. Whenever one of them is done, I can then move on to yours, or depending if there was a lineup, I would let them know how many were ahead of them, because I didn't want to be working on too many because I knew it would be more than I can handle. Now, also in the same sense of biting off more than you can chew is taking on projects that are too large for you. I've talked before, back in episode 77, how being a self-employed designer requires a team effort. In that one, I was talking about how you should have a team of people you can turn to do stuff for you, especially the stuff that you're not good at. But sometimes you don't have that in place, or you think you can handle everything whenever you can't. So taking on a project that's much too big for just one person and attempting to do it all yourself is biting off more than you can chew. So know whenever a client presents a project to you, is this a project that I'm going to need to get some help on? And that's perfectly okay. Just because a client is coming to you and hiring you doesn't mean you have to do everything. As long as you manage it and you're the front person, the client should be perfectly happy. So don't bite off more than you can chew. Now, another effective way to ruin your business is overreacting to criticism. If you don't have a thick skin, you shouldn't be in the design business. I mean, we are going to get criticized. Even the designs that you think are amazing, and then the client will criticize it. That's just the nature of our business. Design is subjective. What one person thinks is amazing, another person won't like. I see things all the time that people are saying, wow, this is amazing. I love this new trend. And I look at it and I think it's horrible. But that's just me. Other people obviously are enjoying it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as popular as it is. So overreacting to criticism from a client, whether it's emotional, you get angry when they say something, or sad, or having your feelings hurt because they say something to you and you take it in the wrong way, is a great way to ruin your business and reputation, especially if the client sees you reacting to that criticism. You know the old saying that the client is always right. Well, we know darn well that sometimes the client isn't right. But there are some times as well where we have to just bite our lip and go with it because they are the client. So never overreact to criticism. Now, the number 6 on my effective ways to ruin your business is overpromising and underdelivering. That could fall into many different categories. I talked about deadlines earlier and missing deadlines. Well, that's something you could overpromise and underdeliver. Tell somebody you have something ready for them by Friday and then not get it done by Friday. But sometimes overpromising and underdelivering could be your abilities or your skills. I'm in a position right now where I have a proof out to a client, and on that proof, I had to do some illustration. And they hired me specifically for me to do the illustration, not for me to farm it out to somebody else. It's a long story. I did something for a client years ago, and I did a really crude illustration to demonstrate something, and they loved the illustration, and they decided to go with it. And it's one of those things I cringe when I look at it, but the client loved it. And I hate to say it, but it did work for the application that we used it in. But now, years later, they came back to me and they say they want another illustration done in the same style. And I've told them that I'm not an illustrator. That's not what I do. I hire out illustrations because I'm not an illustrator. But they don't care. They still want me to attempt to do it in the way I'd done it before. So I did. Now, this is a case where I'm not overpromising and underdelivering. I made sure to let them know that this is not my skill. I'm not happy with this, but I will do it because they're willing to pay, and they're specifically saying they want me to do it, even though they know I'm not an illustrator. I think that's something they like about it is it looks good, but it doesn't look professional. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyways. So in this case, I'm not overpromising and underdelivering. What would be is if I told the person, yeah, okay, I'll illustrate that for you. No problem. Yeah, I can do that. When I know darn well I'm not an illustrator. In that case, I would be overpromising. So just be wary of that, whether it's your abilities, your skills, telling somebody, you want an e-commerce store for your website? No problem. I can do that. And you've never done one before? Don't overpromise and then go to the client afterward and say, I'm not sure if I can handle this. I bit off more than I can chew. We talked about that one a couple of numbers ago. So just be careful of that, of overpromising and underdelivering. Now, number 7 on my list of effective ways to ruin your business is not taking time to learn and to experiment. After being in this business for 30 years now, I know that tools change, design trends change, skill sets change, all things change, they evolve, they migrate. And as designers, we need to stay on top of those things, keep up on trends, learn new skills. I don't lay out pages the same way I did 10 or 20 years ago because trends have changed. Popular font sizes and letter spacing, stuff like that has changed. Just the fonts themselves that were used. I mean, if you study design, you can look at a project and determine what decade it was probably designed in based on the fonts that were used. So one thing that could really harm your business and your reputation is not taking time to learn new skills and keep up on trends and experiment. I mean, new tools are coming out all the time. Adobe, every few months there's an update with some new feature to Illustrator and Photoshop and all sorts of other programs. Keep up on them. Even if you don't think you're going to use them, I'm not saying take an hour or so to learn exactly the fundamentals of how they work and all that, but learn about them. Way back in episode 8 of the podcast, I did talk about just-in-time learning, where you don't need to learn all this stuff right now if you don't think you're going to use it. But it's a good idea to know about it. So when Illustrator or Photoshop comes out with something new, find out about that. Go look, read up on what is new, what new features. And if it's not something you need right now, you don't need to go learn how to do it, but at least know that it's there. And when you do need it, take the time to learn it, to experiment, and keep up on those things. Keep up on design trends, follow websites, follow blogs that tell you what sort of stuff is trending right now, either to follow it or to avoid it. There's some trends that I know in some cases, I look at trends because I want to avoid being trendy. Just keep up on things. Keep up on what is happening now in the design space. If you just rely on what you know currently and never progress, never grow, your business will never succeed. Now, along the same lines as that, number 8 on my list is an effective way to ruin your design business is not taking time to be inspired. You need to take the time. You are a creative person. You're a designer. You need to take the time to study the world around you. That doesn't mean studying other flyers, or if you're a web designer, studying other websites. You need to study the world around you. It sounds crazy, but looking at the way a chair is designed, or looking at the angle that the legs are on a table, or even looking out at a tree and how the branches connect to each other, all of that can affect your creativity. You need to find inspiration in everyday things. I mean, I love in the summer just lying down on a lawn chair and looking up at the clouds. And I know I used to do it as a child. I still do it today. I look for shapes in the clouds and images and get inspired. I love looking at sunsets, the way the light goes through the clouds, or the way the different variation and hues of color spread across the sky. I imagine people that paint study that. Now, I'm not a painter. I don't do that sort of thing. But I can still appreciate and be inspired by that and look at the gradation. Like, how do those colors look together? You need to take the time to be inspired by what you see around you. And I'm not just talking about design. I'm talking about everything. When you're going through a fashion store or a clothing store, look at the patterns on the clothes. Look at the color combinations that are being used. That's all stuff that you can incorporate into your creativity and into your designs. Now, number 9 on my list of effective ways to ruin your design business is when you're talking to a client and you tell them that their previous or current design that they're using is bad. You should never, ever, ever, and I emphasize this, tell a client that what they are currently using is bad and you can do a better job for them. There's nothing wrong with telling a client you can do better or you can do something different or you can improve on something, but never tell them it's bad because you don't know the history behind that piece. Unless it's something you actually designed yourself, in which case, say you designed something 10 years ago and you're saying, man, I've really improved it as a designer. I look at that and it's really bad. I can do something much better now. And I've done that before. I've redesigned a client's website, which it had been 10 years old and I had designed the original one. And I told them, I said, I don't show your website to anybody anymore because I'm actually ashamed of the way it looks now compared to the websites I'm designing. But if that was somebody else that had designed it, I would never tell a client that. Because you don't know if whoever designed it previously was a friend, was a family member. Maybe the client himself or herself designed it. And by telling him it's bad, you're actually insulting the client, which can really hurt you. Because even if the client knows it's bad, the fact that you're telling them it's bad can be viewed as that insult, and they may not want to work with you. So no matter how cringeworthy somebody's design is currently, your best bet is to go in and tell them ways that you think you can improve or help them and not tell them how bad you think their current stuff is. Now, number 10 on my list of effective ways to ruin your business is talking carelessly about clients. This one should be a no-brainer. You should not be bad-mouthing clients, even to friends or family, because you never know how it could come back to hurt you. You never know when, if you mention a client you're having trouble with to somebody else, you don't know if that person might talk to somebody who in turn knows the client. I want to tell you a story here. This is a little bit of a reverse scenario. It's not me talking bad mouth about a client, but I was out at a restaurant one day with my family and I saw one of my clients. This is back when I was at the print shop. One of my clients walked in and she was sitting down with a group of people. And I noticed her, she didn't notice me. And it was somebody that I was currently working on a project. I'd been working for the past couple of weeks on a project for her, and I thought everything was going well. Well, at the end of our meal, we got up and paid the bill and all that. And as I was going out, I thought I'd just go by and say hi, be polite. So I walked up behind the client and she was sitting with a bunch of people. And as I was approaching, I heard that she was talking about the design project I was working on. And she was talking about how she was upset because the egotistical, know-it-all designer that was working on her project just didn't understand what she was trying to say. And as she went on and all that, and I was standing and I heard this and I was really surprised. And then one of her friends saw me standing there and asked us, "Can I help you?" or all that. And so I looked down. The client had her back to me. So I says, "Oh no, I was just coming to say hi to," and I mentioned the client. And I says, "I'm the egotistical know-it-all designer she was just talking about." And I turned around and I walked away. I was angry in that. Well, I can tell you that this is not the same as what I'm talking about, talking carelessly about clients. This case, it was a client talking carelessly about me, not realizing that I was there. But that ruined that relationship. I can tell you that that client never came back to the print shop. That project, she sent a payment to pay for the work done, and we never completed that project. I mean, she was embarrassed. I'm sure of it. I know years after that, running into her, even today, like that was 20 years ago. And even today, if I see her somewhere and she spots me, she'll turn around and go the other way. She doesn't want anything to do with me. And it's more out of embarrassment, I'm sure. But I'm thinking about the reversal of that role. If you talk about a client to somebody, even if it's a close friend, I mean, it's one thing to talk about a client. It's different to name the client. I talk about situations on the podcast. Like in this situation, I just talked about this client, but you have no idea who I'm talking about. That is, okay. It's okay. It's doable. I often share stories on the podcast about people, but I never mention any companies or any people by name. Well, that's okay. But when you start naming people, it could come back to hurt you. The same thing when you're talking to clients and you mention competition, not your competition, but their competition. I have two, I've mentioned on the podcast before, I have two clients that are golf courses. Neither golf course knows that I do work for the other one. And I will never mention as I'm talking with one that, oh yeah, when I did this for the other one, I'll never talk to them about that. Not bad mouthing or anything. I would just never discuss with one golf course that I also do work for the other. I have 4 different lawyers that I do work for. Well, when I'm working with them, I will never mention that I'm doing work for these other lawyers because I don't know if they're friends, if they're competition, if there's animosity, what. I have no idea what the connection is between them. So I will never mention to one client that I'm working for another client in the same industry. So just be very careful about talking carelessly about clients, because if that comes out, that could ruin your reputation, ruin your business, and you're done, because that sort of thing spreads fast. Now, number 11 on the list, again, this should be a no-brainer, but is lying to a client. And this could be lying about any aspect of whatever, lying about your abilities, lying about how you're going to complete their project, lying about the time you're going to spend on a project or have spent on a project. If you bill by the hour and maybe you told the client up front, it's like, yeah, I think this job's going to take 6 hours to complete, and you manage to complete it in 3 hours, and then you kind of say, I told the client it's going to take 6, so I'm just going to invoice him for 6 hours, even though it took 3. Well, that's the sort of thing that could come back and hurt you, especially if you start bragging, like say, go to a friend and say, I charged a client for 6 hours for this, but it only took me 3 hours to do. Well, if somehow that word gets out and the client finds out you're lying, you can be in big, big trouble. And that's also lying about other things along the way, as you're designing. When I was at the print shop, when I first started at the print shop, there was this other gentleman that was there. He was a couple of years older than I was, and I kind of looked up to him. I was fresh out of school, and he was a few years removed from school, and he was really cool. He drove the cool car. He dressed really neat, and I really emulated to be like him. Well, he was one of those guys, and I must say, I'm a little bit of a procrastinator as well, and he was a big procrastinator, and he would often wait till the last minute to do a project. And I remember him getting a phone call from a client and telling the client, it's like, yeah, I've been working on your project all week. I'm just about finished. I'll have something to you on Friday. Like this was a Wednesday or something. And he says, yeah, I'll have it all done to show you on Friday. Yeah, I'm just about done. I'm really busy right now with some other projects, so I'll have yours done by Friday. And he told the client that, yeah, everything's going well and then hung up the phone. Well, an hour later, the client showed up. They happened to be in the neighborhood and they wanted to see what he was coming up to, just in case they can give some final ideas or thoughts before he finalized things. When in fact, he hadn't actually started the project. He figured that he had nothing else scheduled for Thursday. He thought on Thursday, I'll be able to complete the whole project, finish off any touches on Friday, and then present it to the client. Well, the client showed up and insisted on seeing the progress he had done so far. And he had to tell the client that he had lied to them, that he hadn't actually started the project. And I know that this happened a couple of times, and that designer that I looked up to ended up getting fired because of that. He was lying to the clients. And he was lying to management, because the management would come to ask how the progress on a certain project is. And he would say, yeah, it's coming along, when he hadn't actually started it. I've used college students to do menial tasks. I had a project once. I was working for a company doing a catalog, and they had hundreds of images. I hired a student from school that was recommended to me to eliminate these backgrounds and just put a white background on the image, is what I'm trying to say. And at one point in the middle of the project, I emailed the student and I asked, how are things coming along? Because there was a couple of hundred images that they were doing. And I just asked, how are things coming along? And the student said, yeah, I'm almost done. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. I should have something for you very soon to give back to you. Well, 2 days later, I got an email from that student telling me that they couldn't open the file I had originally sent them that had all the image. There was something that had corrupted on something, and they couldn't open it. And I was saying, well, if you can't open the original file I sent you, how were you 2/3 of the way or 3/4 of the way through completing the project? And they admitted that they had lied to me and they hadn't actually started the project. Well, when I found that out, I pulled it from them and told them that, okay, well, thank you very much, but I'm going to find somebody else, because I didn't appreciate being lied to. I contacted the teacher, explained what happened, and asked for somebody else. And that other student came through really good, did a really good job, but it's the sort of thing. I didn't want to work with that person anymore because they had lied to me. They told me that the project was almost completed when in fact they hadn't even started it. So lying to a client for any reason is a great and efficient way to ruin your business. And now the last, number 12 on my list of effective ways to ruin your business is passing off somebody else's work as your own. Now, I'm not talking about stealing somebody's work and claiming it. What I'm talking about is if you use stock photography in your designs, let your clients know that you're using stock photography. There's nothing wrong with stock images. Yes, it's always great to create your own stuff, but sometimes it's just so much easier to grab some stock imagery. If you're creating a brochure for somebody and you need some icons, instead of creating all the icons from scratch, sometimes it's easier to just go pay a couple of dollars and buy some icons off a site like Deposit Photos or iStock or whatever. But if you're going to do that, let the clients know. I recently had to do something where a client had supplied an illustration. It was a brochure that they were doing, and on the brochure there was an illustration. They had this illustration for years, and they asked me, he says, is there any way you can have the little caricature of the little person there holding a mug of beer? And I said, sure, I can do that, no problem. So instead of drawing it, because again, I'm not an illustrator, or hiring an illustrator to do it, I just went to a stock photo site, found an illustration of a glass of beer or a mug of beer, and I used it. And I told the client, I said, that's just a stock photo of a beer mug. Because when they saw it, they said, oh yeah, you did a really good job. And that. And I told them, I said, well, that wasn't really me. That's a stock image of a beer mug that I put in there. So it was really quick and easy. So never take credit for that sort of stuff. And if you do hire contractors to do work, like if you hire an illustrator to do work for you, never take credit for that. You can take credit for doing the arrangement and working up on the overall design, but don't take credit for the illustration if you didn't actually do it. I always let people know that I hire an illustrator to do my work. I hire a photographer to do certain photos if I need to, or whatever. Even writing copy, I hire a copywriter, because you do not want a client to look at something, or especially if you're using, say, a stock image, and all of a sudden see that stock image somewhere else and think that somebody stole it from them. That could really land you in hot water. So never pass off somebody else's work as your own. But again, that should be a no-brainer. You should realize that. But I just wanted to add these to the list. So those are the 12 effective ways that I have that could ruin your design business. taking too long to reply or failing to communicate, missing deadlines, showing a lack of confidence, biting off more than you can chew, overreacting to criticism, overpromising and underdelivering, not taking time to learn and experiment, not taking time to be inspired, telling someone their previous or current designs are bad, talking carelessly about a client, lying to a client, and finally passing off somebody else's work as your own. You're working hard to build your business and to build your design reputation. They both play a very important role in how people decide whether or not they're going to hire you, and after they hire you, whether or not they're going to keep working with you down the road. If you rely on any of these 12 items that I talked about, and it gets back to your client, there is a very, very good chance that you have ruined that relationship with them and they will find another designer. So going back to the metaphor I used way at the beginning, just like the mountain climber halfway up the mountain, you do not want to slip up when it comes to your business or your design reputation. Now, do you have any comments about today's topic? I would love to hear them. Please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 151. That's 151, and leave your comment for today's episode. And now, today's question of the week. This week's question comes in from Kevin. It says, I have a question about closing deals. At times, potential clients reach out to me with an interest of having a website designed for them. They will usually reach out to me by email telling me the basic details for the website, such as page structure, features, colors, etc. I realize that when replying to their first email, most of them never reply back. So how would you go about responding to clients' emails? Do you tell them your pricing straight up? Do you ask them to tell you their budget for a project? Well, thank you very much for the question, Kevin. And I can tell you, first of all, I will never discuss a project over email. I want to either get on a video or on phone with them. So whenever I get an email of that sorts, the first thing I would do is see if they have contact information. If they have contact information other than just their email, I will call them. Sometimes it's just a matter of looking at their email address. If there's a business associated with it, like the domain name, I will look up that website and see if I can find a contact information for this person at that business and then call them up. I want to discuss this sort of stuff in person, live. I'm not going to do it over email. And that's for various reasons. For one, I find that most clients that come to me, especially for a website, they really don't know what they want. So I need to really discuss with them what exactly they need their website to do. Now, the other thing, you mentioned prices. Do you ask them for a budget or you tell them your prices? Well, I can tell you sometimes when I'm talking to a client on the phone or over video, I can usually get the feeling if I'm too expensive a designer for them. And if I'm starting to get that feeling, I will stop the conversation and just mention to them, says, by the way, before we go any further, I just want to let you know that my minimum, and it's usually my minimum, I'll say my minimum to start a design is X amount of dollars. Do you still want to continue this conversation? And you say it politely. And in some cases, I've had people go, oh, I didn't realize it was that expensive. No, I can't afford that. And I would say, okay, well, thank you very much. You know, I appreciate you reaching out to me. By the way, if you do talk to some other designers, here are some things you should ask them. Here are some things you should look out for. I always try to provide a little bit of value to them. Even though they can't afford me, I don't want them to get screwed over in the future with somebody else. So I will tell them that if you're going to another designer that is going to be less expensive, here's some stuff you should look out for or ask them to make sure you're getting at least this value for whatever you're going to pay. And what I've found with that is sometimes the client will say, they can't afford me. And they'll go and a week, 2 weeks, a month later, I'll get a call back and they said, do you remember me? We talked about this. Well, I contacted some other designers and you know what? I know I said I couldn't afford you, but I'm going to scrounge out the money and I think I really want to work with you. And that's happened to me before. Or what's happened is somebody's come back to me much later and say they didn't like the experience of working with another designer, but they really appreciated how I had talked to them and the advice I had given them. And now that they're in a better situation or they have a different project altogether, they were wondering if we can work together. So I've had both those scenarios work. So yes, you can usually get a feel on where or how much they want to spend and whether it's in line with what you have or what your minimum is. And you could put an end to that conversation right there and say, listen, here's my minimum price. I don't want to waste your time if you can't afford that. But if you can, then we can keep communicating. Now, if you're talking, and as I said, a lot of times clients aren't exactly sure what they want. And in a lot of those situations, I will ask them, I says, can you please tell me what sort of budget do you have for this? Because your budget, I says, I'm not trying to find out your budget because I want to know how much to charge you. I want to know your budget because I want to know what sort of website to build for you. If you have a budget of $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, it'll drastically change the way I build your website. So by knowing what sort of budget you have going in, then I can better direct this conversation we're having to the website that will suit your budget best. And I can't tell you how many clients have appreciated that thought pattern. And some of them have said, well, we hadn't really given it much thought. And then they'll come up with an arbitrary number. Let's say we have $4,000. What would we get for that? Well, then I would explain to them, okay, well, this is what you get for $4,000. And then I'll always try to throw in a few little things and I'll say, well, there's this possibility, but that you couldn't get for $4,000. You'd have to spend maybe $6,000 to get that. And if you go back to episode 145, 3-tiered pricing strategy, a lot of that works into that strategy where you give 3 different prices. Well, that's part of asking for the budget is when they tell you, okay, we have a budget of $4,000 or $5,000, because sometimes what a client will say, they may have a budget of $10,000, but they'll come to you and say, our budget is $8,000 because they want to see what you can do for $8,000. And if they can save $2,000, sure, they might say $7,000 or whatever. So that's when you go in and you say, well, for $8,000, this is what I can do. I can do this, 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 this. Now you were talking about this and I have a solution for that. But if you want to go with that solution, it's going to cost more. The website might cost $9,000 or $10,000. And then the client come back and go, well, we can probably arrange another $2,000 and do a $10,000 website. So that's the way I would go with it, Kevin. Now, as I said, never reply to an email with your information, even if that's what they're asking. I would either contact them or reply to the email saying, I can't really discuss that via email. I need to ask you some questions. Can we please arrange for a time? Please call me. Here's my information, or give me your information and I'll call you. I would like to discuss this with you over the phone or in person or over video. I will never, ever just reply to an email and say, yeah, sure, here's the price. Here's what I can do. And that, no, I won't do that. There's too much that can be misinterpreted. And even when the client is giving you the information, the client, as I said, most of the time won't know exactly what they need because they don't know what a website's capable of or that unless they are familiar with web design, in which case there's probably no reason for them to contact you. So anyways, that's my reply, Kevin. I hope that answers your question. If not, send me another email and we can continue the discussion. But speaking of discussions, I love these questions I've been getting. I still have a few more. I got a lot of them over the holidays. I still have a few more to go, but that doesn't mean I don't want yours. If you would like to reach out to me and ask a question for the podcast or just talk to me about anything, you can always visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and fill out that form there with your question, with your comment, anything you want. Just use that form and I will get back to you either on the podcast here or reply to your email. So thank you very much, Kevin, and to everybody else who does use the feedback form to get a hold of me. And that is it for this episode. I don't have any new iTunes reviews. I'm still sitting at, I forget if it was 91 or 92. I haven't had a new review in a little while, but if you are so inclined, you could visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes and leave a review for the podcast there. I would appreciate it. What else I would appreciate is if you shared the podcast with your fellow designers. So reach out to them. Let them know that this great podcast that can help them out is available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, or they can even go to the Apple App Store or Google App Store and download the Resourceful Designer apps and listen there. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for sticking in until the end. I do appreciate you so much, and I will be back again with you next week. Until then, I wish you all the best with your graphic design business. I am Mark DeCote, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.